Ha, ha. Steals the swords, feel the wars, fighting my blood down to the core. Warriors from medieval age, fear the reign of night brigades. Crusades into the room, moving through the temples and tombs. Scared and placed, prepare to face Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. 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 Professor Awesome and the minions of doom.
Hello, minions. My wife's flight is delayed, and I was supposed to be on my way to go get her, but I've got a little bit of extra time, not really enough time to do much more on the chapter I'm editing. So I wanted to talk about a question which was raised in class today, which I think is an important one, and it has to do with cursive. Now, if you have children in school or you're in any way involved in elementary education, you know that this has become a kind of big debate in recent years, and it has to do with some school districts are no longer teaching cursive writing and others are. And this is a question which actually connects some linguistic issues and some emotional issues together. It's not really a simple thing to to come up with a policy solution for. So let me just first of all get past certain ideas. The first one is, we were talking in my class about pictographs versus ideographs and logographs, syllabaries, phonetic systems of writing, basically different systems of writing. And one of the ideas that I tried to express to them is that we kind of have this sense that, primitive man uses pictographs, and then as we become wiser and more intelligent, we move to ideographs like Chinese writing or hieroglyphs or this kind of thing, and eventually we move to things which are much more phonetic. But the truth is, although in some ways there's a kind of general movement in writing systems that way, there's nothing inherently superior about phonetic writing systems to, say, ideographic writing systems. It's very much a kind of fork versus fork, knife, and spoon controversy. The superior utensil to a fork, knife, and spoon depends very much on what you're eating. So let me give you a sense of this. If I were to type out 1 plus 1 equals 2, and I would do O-N-E-P-L-U-S, O-N-E-E-Q-U-A-L-S-T-W-O, I'm doing that in a very phonetic way. Whereas when I am trying to lay out the equation and I put the Arabic digit 1, the symbol, the plus symbol, and so forth, I'm really setting it up as a kind of ideographic writing. And I think that's a good sense of why we would do something in one situation rather than another. Why would I do math using these Arabic numerals rather than spelling it out in English and doing it phonetically? Well, it's because when I'm talking about math, there are conventions which are international conventions. And so the person I'm communicating this to, they don't have to be able to speak English. And that's one of the real strengths of logographic systems, right? Whereas phonetic systems, they're able to convey a great deal more information about how something sounds, how to pronounce something. I think we've all been there where you see a word you've never heard pronounced, especially a person's name, and you're uncertain as to how to pronounce it. Well, think about if you're using a logographic system or ideographic system. There's no information there about how to say this thing. And so each of these kinds of systems that we're talking about, they're useful for some things and not useful for other things. So I wanted to sort of get out of the way this idea that certain kinds of writing systems are inherently better than other kinds of writing systems. They are inherently better for this purpose or for that purpose. The other thing, has to do with the idea that handwriting styles change over time. You know, paleographers, as people who study handwriting, this is not a kind of weird pseudoscience where we say like, oh, if you write your S's really boldly, it shows that you are highly intelligent but prone to self-doubt or something. Instead, it's really the sense of how handwriting styles can change over time and do change over time. And so we're able to date manuscripts pretty precisely based on the style of handwriting that was popular during that quarter century. And it can be a little hard, I think, for people to understand this until you look at maybe older documents, like, say, in English, like, say, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. You look at that handwriting style, and you would never write that handwriting style today. It's really because that was the style in a formal document at the time. So handwriting styles do change over time. And so there's nothing, the point of saying all this is there's nothing inherent in cursive that is inherently good, nor is there any reason, like, even if we kept something that we called cursive, it will change over time. So what about these policy debates we have in schools about should we be teaching elementary school kids about how to write in cursive? And I think the reason that this gets imbued with a lot of emotion isn't just the idea that, oh, well, when I was a kid I learned it and it was good enough for me, but rather what cursive meant in the past. See, the idea of printing is what one learns to do when you're in kindergarten. But as you get older, the reason you would want to move to cursive is you simply need to write more quickly. And cursive allows you to write much more quickly than it would if you were just printing. And really, it's a sign for older generations of greater literacy. People who, not just children, but really people who were not literate or were not very literate, could basically print. And a sign that you had gone to greater literacy, so that you didn't want to be held back in the speed with which you wrote, was using cursive. And so cursive was a tool, and to some degree still is a tool, of people who are more literate than people who are not. And I mean literate in the sense of just being facile with reading and writing. I don't mean the sense of they have good taste in literature or anything like that. I'm just simply talking about the speed and efficiency with which one can process text intellectually. And so for older people, this is really the cultural meaning of cursive. And so when they hear, well, the elementary school is no longer teaching cursive, this, in a very direct way, signals that they're dumbing down the curriculum, that children are less literate, and that they're not going to be able to, the idea that the children are not able to function as their parents did. Now, to skeptics of criticism, to cursive, I think that criticism, the problem is, for them, it's like, no. Most of the textual production that children are doing and receiving, or that anyone's doing or receiving nowadays, is not in handwritten form, whether printed or in cursive, but rather is typed out in some way, whether it's a text on the phone or an email or some other form like this. And so the emotion that's embedded in this is a sense that somehow writing in cursive is so horribly old-fashioned that immediately you're anti-progress if you're in favor of cursive. And so this, which should be a complicated but not particularly emotional curricular debate, becomes this very kind of powerful emotional curriculum debate, where I think both sides maybe even agree on the basic principles, but each one thinks the other one is somehow being dumb or dumbing down the curriculum through keeping us with something that's retrograde, or by jettisoning something which is a sign of great literacy. So what I think the policy debate comes down to, and frankly I'm agnostic on the issue of whether we should, has to do not so much with producing cursive, but with reading cursive. I do have the sense that children should be able to read cursive, largely because I already am seeing that my students are not really able to understand things if I write them in cursive. And I am not so unbelievably elderly that I will pass away in the next 5 years, I hope. That would be, I'm still at the age where that would be tragic. And yet these children in elementary school will grow up in the time that I'm talking about and will go into the working world and will be dealing with people who expect them to have this basic form of literacy. So I do have the sense that it is still probably essential for children to learn this, but every day it becomes less essential. Every day they're going to encounter fewer and fewer people who are able to use this, what is really a much more efficient form of handwriting, and who simply are not handwriting things at all. And I think if I were in a school district where the teachers said, well, we feel like this is not a vital issue, I wouldn't that they shouldn't have to do this anymore. I certainly wouldn't throw down over this. But I did want to talk about it just enough to point out to people that the emotions that are connected with this really color the debate much more than the actual kind of facts of how handwriting styles change and the role that handwriting has in our, in our society and how we understand the intelligence of people. It makes sense that people want their children to have every advantage, whatever that would mean. And so I guess this is not really so much an opinion, but rather a plea to people on both sides of this to understand really why the people on the other side of this debate about whether children should be taught cursive or not, why they feel the way they feel. Not why they think what they think, but why they feel the way they feel, and ways that you can kind of try to bridge that gap with them, and to acknowledge their fears, and to kind of demonstrate that no, even though you fear this thing, in fact, the thing that you fear is maybe not something that you need to worry about quite so much, and that we, on the other side of the debate, whether we are the ones to say, oh no, you're retrograde for forcing our kids to learn this outdated technique, or you're dumbing down the curriculum so that children will be less, literate than they were before. People on both sides of the debate can then be able to engage with the other side and to affirm their fears and address them and find a way to move forward. Anyway, those are just a few thoughts on cursive. So until next time, minions.